think we're all set.
We have a few minutes open now for questions and comments. So let's see, are you going to run the thing around? I saw a question right.
I wanted to hear I would love to hear the Dylan Thomas quotation. I didn't get the full implication of it.
Oh, the Dylan Thomas quote, "And freely he goes lost in the famous unknown light of fabulous dear God." It's from poem on his birthday. Okay, you can pull that right out about midway through it. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I'll try not to sound judgmental, but okay. In our modern clinging reaction to organized religions, where or what sort of community nourishes the non-clinger?
Nourishes a non-thinker? A non-clinging. What kind of community encourages non-clinging? Well, they're sort of oxymorons, you know. And most communities wind up having this nefarious habit of essentially becoming, you know, fraught with either rigidity or sentimentality. I would say come to your contemplative practice groups. Work with groups that you can that hold you lightly and don't take themselves too seriously. The best approximations of spiritual communities I've ever participated in have been choirs, and that's because they don't ever set out to say, "Oh, we're a choir. Let's have an alto bonding party," or let's let the basses get together and talk about how we feel. But we are all individually committed to a goal which can only take place if everybody contributes out of their own integrity. And I think to develop, I would love to see more contemplative practice groups that don't become support groups, but become you do the practice, you read a little in some of the classics, Cloud, Meister Eckhart, Cloud of Unknowing. There's some fabulous material. We organized a wonderful community a few years ago in Aspen around Michael Brown's magnificent material in the presence process. And I think there might be some interest here in organizing such a thing, but it really begins to teach the art of taking responsibility and non-clinging. So stay in touch, but basically once you spot the trap, then you can begin to develop communities that don't do it. One of my great friends who's a Buddhist wag says, "What's the plural of egoic?" We-goic. So watch out. Yeah, good question, yeah. Okay, Rosemary, did you have a question back there? Oh, here's one over here. Yep. Okay.
When you're practicing, when you're meditating, and you're letting go of thought, and you feel like you are, but then you sense yourself sensing, is the sensing itself, the sense of space growing, that kind of thing, is that something to let go of as well? Because it's not a thought, but it is a, I don't know where it lies.
This is a gray area. This is a gray area, and in that because centering prayer doesn't give an object to the attention, it doesn't give the mind something to chew on, so the mind will often go into self-reflection about, and wow, is this silence, or is this a thought? Is this a thought? Have I grabbed onto it yet, or can I let it be because it's not a thought? All you have to do is say, "Gotcha." And if it's enough to even raise the question, let it go. But don't worry, because remember that the intention in centering prayer, when you're in this kind of limbo land with thoughts, always better to let it go than to sit there wondering, is this a thought and should I let it go? Just let it go and have done with it. Because we're practicing the letting go, and eventually the problem is that the ego is still curious about how am I doing, is this right, am I having the right experience? And when you finally grow this self up to the point where that's no longer interesting, you won't pay so much attention to it. Okay, so just be patient.
couple observations I'd hope you'd comment on. One, it feels very much like a Quaker meeting in this large a group, and I wonder if you've attended those and how you feel about those. And two, I noticed the ratio of women to men is like 3 or 4 to 1, and if you have any comments as to why that might be.
God's harem? Yeah. Well, as to the question of Quaker meeting, yes, I had my early childhood experience, and my first patternings in centering prayer were in Quaker meeting. My parents sent me to a Quaker school. We grew up in Westchester, Pennsylvania. So that was unprogrammed meeting, and that was the first place where I actually got a taste of silence as the essence of religion. And lessons I've learned from the Quakers I've carried with me all my life. So yeah, I think there's a great overlap, and that it's interesting to create a relationship between centering prayer and Quakerism too, because a lot of Quakers nowadays, particularly new converts from other religions, have lost that old sense of the gathered meeting and what happens in the silence. And a lot of work with centering prayer has been rebooting Quaker spirituality. So I think there's a living dialogue there, but I'm deeply graceful of it. As to the preponderance of women in the spiritual path, I don't know. I know that Richard Rohr took on seriously the question of where are all the men, and has done some very, very wonderful work with men's spirituality. And Richard's comment is that men in general, and I hope I'm not piling cliche upon cliche, but men in general have a real difficult time, because it's not culturally programmed, to learn about vulnerability as a place of real strength. And that a lot of the former structures of the church, which essentially insulated men in positions of authority, like, you know, the men were the priests and the men were the pastors, gave men a safe place to hide. And that as the church has moved to both democratize its structures and as a lot of the contemplative practice has stressed this kind of surrender, it leaves guys in a position of real discomfort. And so Richard's thing is, well, let's get the guys together. We don't need to compound the problem by having the room 90% women. And there's a lot of work really based on, Richard has also observed that you have to make it dangerous. That, you know, that his men work has got this 3-day survival thing in the middle of it, you know. But I think there are some patterns. When we move to wisdom schools, we immediately have a 20% jump in men, because you're not just sitting on cushions all day, you're working. And I do believe that it's slightly unnatural to do just meditation and nothing else, even for Buddhists, and that we really need to take steps to recover a full kind of karma yoga, full spectrum integration of the human beings that allows all of our gender predispositions more space. So I agree it's a real issue, but we'll see where we go with it. It's very gratifying that there are as many guys here as there are today. So thank you to all of you.
Cynthia, you've contrasted the kenotic path with the brahmacharya path of withholding your energy. Mm-hmm. And it seems that the kenotic path is sort of a path of everyday mysticism in a way. So I'm wondering, for those of us who have chaotic lives and families, have you thought about that aspect of it?
Oh, yes, indeed. And you're exactly right. There's a great Rumi line that goes, your anxiety comes from your search for tranquility. It goes on to say, accept chaos and peace will surely follow. And so often in our spiritual path, we've We've equated spiritual progress with a set of conditions which are impossible for people in the world. I mean, centering prayer is great, but, we can't go to monasteries. We can't have shh all the time. Try and sell that to a 3-year-old. Many of us are working 2 jobs, and life has got a huge hustle and bustle. And so we have to begin to discover a silence, a solitude that comes from a different place, not from external conditions, but from internal conditions. And I think in the act of being able to let go, I love your everyday mysticism. It's a very good idea. Sufis in the Naqshbandi order, when they go through their 40-day, eye of the needle, super intense meditation thing, they aren't placed in a quiet desert. They're often placed on a busy street corner. Because if it isn't within you, you're not going to find it without you. And to learn that surrender or letting go or making space is the gateway to that greater unity of life, I think is something we can certainly take out to our children, to our fractured lives, and begin to live it in the world. So thank you for that comment. Yeah. Well, let's get a couple more questions, and then, let's see. Becca.
I'm interested in I don't know if it's a spectrum between desire for an object or desire and no desire or non-attachment. Mm-hmm. Because what if it's God's desire inside of us letting itself be known? Mm-hmm. How do we discern whether that's our desire or God's desire?
Uh-huh. That's a very brilliant question. Well, I hope, did you all hear it? How do we discern whether it's God's desire or our desire? Is passionlessness, i.e. a state of no desiring, is that a doable state on the planet? Is it even a desirable state? And I would say no. That we've got some very classic, but I think bad theology that suggests that the world was created out of agape, of God's overabundance of non-desiring energy, and that to the point that we have non-desiring, we're like God. But I think this is really just bad theology. All mystics have known that yearning is built into everything. And the energy that holds the gravitational fields of everything together is fraught with this yearning of everything for everything else. And the Sufis have a great statement. It's an extra Quranic statement. God speaks and says, I was a hidden treasure, and I love to be known. And so I created the worlds visible and invisible. Thinking that even the divine has this yearning for intimacy through self-disclosure. And it's actually at that point that we are made in the image of God. Think of it that way. That what we share with God is this yearning for intimacy through self-disclosure. And yes, the ache of the divine for us reverberates around like the original Big Bang in the universe. And something that's really interesting when you're feeling yearning, not only for God, but you're feeling yearning for a dead spouse, is to all of a sudden flip it and be able to hear the yearning is always a two-way street, and that on that two-way street, absence becomes presence. So, given that desiring is the ground of the universe and all we ever know about anything, then desire becomes gentled and deeper and more capacious when it's passed through kenosis, which is not renunciation, remember? It means giving space. On the kenotic path, you don't push away your beloved. You don't say, I renounce this so I can give myself to God. You just allow a space so that you can live with the beloved in the ache. Read Thomas Merton's last letters after his love affair with M, if you want to have a beautiful description of that. So my formula, what I call Cynthia's Einsteinian theory of the cosmos, is A equals EK. In other words, agape is an alchemical love created when eros, the yearning of everything, is submitted to kenosis, or letting be, giving space. And it takes a whole cosmos, worlds visible and invisible, to participate in this ultimate speaking of the name of God. Agape is not the alpha of God, but the omega. So I think that's probably a note on which to end things. Yes.